praise is due to Allah. All praise is due to Allah. Thank you. Striving as we all are, right? In the most holy name of Allah, who we believe appeared to us in the person of Master Farah Muhammad. We thank Almighty God Allah for his coming. We thank Almighty God Allah for his raising up in our midst the most humble and honorable Elijah Muhammad. And we also thank them for their preparation and their leaving in our midst, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And I'd like to greet you all with the greeting words of peace and paradise. Assalamu alaikum. So we want to give everybody a round of applause who spoke before me. Thank each and every one of you all who are out. And I pray, as I always pray, that what we say today, that you find it to be beneficial and that we can actually use it, right? That after you leave here, that you actually feel that you've learned something and that you've grown, or we have grown to some degree, right? And I'll start off by starting this way. You know, dear family, at one point in the black people's experience here in America, black churches used to be a place where black people would gather, not just to be fed not only to be fed and taught the word of God, but they were also there for a purpose of to get guidance on what was happening in the community, right? So black people will gather sometimes at the churches, and they will gather there to know like what we were experiencing, right? Especially in the 60s. You know, not too far from here at Dookie Chase, they used to gather, Dr. King and them, they will come and they'll have a place upstairs where they will actually gather and strategize for the civil rights movement. And you see a picture here. I'm not saying that is in New Orleans, because it's not. But these civil rights organizers used to use the church as a place where they could strategize boycotts, strategize sit-ins, and voter registration and more, right? And of course, you know, as a follower of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, we wish that they would have also been strategizing more about not forcing integration on our enemy and doing something for ourselves, but that's a whole nother subject, right? And even before the civil rights movement, blacks who were enslaved would gather when permitted by the slave master, and they'll do it in very coded ways where it will be a church, it will be a religious gathering, but they still were giving each other information about what was happening on the plantation. Who was in the house, who got word that the slave master may have been discussing about selling another person's child, or selling the husband away, or selling the wife away, right? And in the midst of them talking about God and Jesus in their way, they articulated that, right? And some of them, and this began to stop after the rebellion of Nat Turner, some of these gatherings were used to actually plan actual rebellions. Right. And when they figured that out, they begin to start saying even more that, yeah, you all can still meet, but when you meet, one of us are going to be there. And so you see some of these old drawings of religious meetings taking place on a plantation, and you see a white person there. Come on now. And if they weren't there, they actually made sure that they got somebody who was black in skin, but they were white in their mind, right? That's right. So I'm laying the base to say that. You may be asking, why am I taking this actual route? Is because I'm laying the base because I want to do the same today. And just the nature of Muhammad Mosque number 46, or any meeting that's connected to the Nation of Islam, is not just religious. You also understand, you leave out hearing how what we have experienced historically, yes, sir, and how all of this also relates to the Bible and the Quran. Yes. Because it actually does, because we are taught that the history that we read in the Bible and the Quran are written in advance. Yes, sir. Right? That's right. So we're not foreign to hearing a speaker, male or female, maybe talking about God, and they start talking about mathematics. That's right. Or they may start talking about English. Yes. Or may start talking about a various word in Hebrew or in Arabic, yes, right? Or in Greek. Or even science. Yes. Because we understand that all of that is connected to the word of God. Yes, sir. And one of the reasons why we don't understand the word of God enough is because our slave master has directly and indirectly taught us to read the scriptures and leave that on a shelf. So we can read in the scripture where it refers to God as him and he, and never bring into our understanding of what that pronoun means, and still walk away after reading the Bible and the Quran thinking that, as the sister Lenora was saying, that God is other than existing in a physical human being.
That's right. Teach.
But not the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. We are encouraged to be students, to read history, to look into mathematics and all of that stuff and see where it fits as it relates to scripture, right? So I'm saying that because there's a topic that we want to talk about today, and we're going to connect it to scriptures, right? Because what is happening today is actually prophesied in these scriptures. And the principle or the thinking of the people who we are in the midst of, God has revealed to us their thinking in these books. However, we don't see it because we have been made to believe that these books are something that have been written or talked about thousands of years ago, right? So today's talk is kind of a political nature. But despite that, I don't want you to think that it's still not connected to God and it's still not connected to Satan. What do I want to talk about? I kind of put this flyer a little early. So the title of today's lecture is this: The Knowledge of Self, the Fear Behind the Ban on Critically Thinking Youth. And some of you may not know, and this is why we're here. The current governor of the state of Louisiana recently issued an executive order. When an executive order, that means that they bypass the other legislative branches that in the state. And he uses his governor, his powers as a governor to get something in place, right? Yes, sir. So he said that there is a ban from kindergarten to 12th grade, where no teachers can talk or teach what they call CRT, critical race theory. Now, when something is a ban, he's saying that it is illegal. That means somebody can go to jail for teaching this, right? Why would he have to ban it? And you're starting to see this in primarily states that have Republican leadership. What is critical race theory? And I want to read this so we can get it. Critical race theory is an academic and legal framework that denotes the systematic racism is a part of the American society. That's right. It's an academic framework that basically says racism is embedded in the actual fabric of America. From education and housing to employment to health care. And there are many more that they could mention. They can also add to that even in religion, even in entertainment, even in sports. They could even say even in food. You don't think racism is in there, right? But when you leave here, just walk down the aisle and you still see it today. The devil food cake is what color? Black. And the angel food cake is white. Right? Yes, sir. Critical race theory recognizes that racism is more than the result of an individual bias and prejudice. It ain't about just some white boy or white woman driving around with the Confederate flag on the back of their pickup truck, right? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's not about some redneck or whatever calling somebody the N-word. It's bigger than that. It goes further. It is essentially an academic response to the erroneous notion that American society and institutions are colorblind. That's a fault. That's false. America is not colorblind. And some tried to say the election of President Barack Obama proved that America is colorblind, and now we have this universal society. Right? But look at the way he was handled. Then it goes further. It says, critical race theory recognizes that racism is embedded in the laws, the policies, and institutions that uphold and reproduce racial inequalities.
That's right. Teach the truth.
According to CRT, societal issues like Black Americans, high mortality rate, outsized exposure to police violence, the school to prison pipeline, the denial of affordable housing, and the death rates of Black women in childbirth are not unrelated anomalies. Meaning this is not an anomaly. This is something that's to this, right? And as I said, Republican governors in various states. You started first hearing about it in Florida with DeSantis. And you see here, this is an old picture, but at that time it was pending. It was in a process in Louisiana. But now it is effect in Louisiana, where it has been banned, right? Now CRT, they were making all of this big argument, but CRT was something that was normally taught in academic circles on universities. They weren't talking about this in high school, K through 12. But this past week, as I said, the governor said, listen, we don't want any of this from the kindergarten age all the way to 12th grade. Now, it's a ban, right? And this ban basically is trying to prevent people from understanding that there's a systematic racism that exists in America. Now, you think about this. I'll try to find some stats. They said that 7 million Black people, there's 7 million children in America that identify as African Americans. They say children. It's got to be a little bit more than that. But look what it says. Out of 130,930 schools, only 700 of them participate in the college credit program that offers African American studies. When I did the percentage, it's 0.53%. It's not even 1%. Not even 1%. And this is a college credit program. That means that not all of the students actually participate in it. Then in a study that I found, it says this, the Pew Research. Nearly 9 in 10 Black Americans say they are at least somewhat informed about the history of Black people in the United States, with family and friends being the single largest source of information about it. They're saying that what Black people know about it, most of them say they know about Black history from the discussions that they have with their families and their friends. Then it goes further. It says smaller shares say that they learned about U.S. Black history from the media, 30%. The internet, 27%. K through 12 schools, 23%. And those who have associate degrees, they say that they learned it at a higher institution. These are very low percentages where they are supposed to be learning about our history. But if we were to examine them people and ask them, what do they consider they've been taught about Black history? The percentages will go further down. Because oftentimes what they are taught what this white society has approved that they can learn.
Right. That's right. Yes, sir.
And you know what most of that is? Dr. King had a dream. Rosa Parks did what? Sat on the back of the bus. The civil rights movement, or that our history began at the beginning of slavery. And you may get some surface teaching about various African kingdoms and African civilizations. If you get that, right? Look at what John Hopkins study said. Most U.S. schools teach Black history, but few do it well. John Hopkins education policy expert says poor materials and a lack of rigor preclude schools from offering rich lessons on the African American experience. my point that I'm trying to say is basically we're in school systems or learning systems that don't do a good job. If they do teach it, they're not doing a good job. So it's basically that as a people, we don't know much about our history from the jump, right? And then when we do, I read a study, it says that most of it begins with the transatlantic slave trade. But this is where we can borrow a page from the book of Master Farad Muhammad. That when he came into acting with our brothers and sisters in Detroit, when he knocked on the door and he had silks and they asked him about the silks, he said, these are silks worn like the ones worn by your brothers and sisters in the East. Right. He didn't begin with slavery.
Right. Come on now.
That's right.
Most of us, when we come into this knowledge, that's the first thing we start telling our people about how they did us dirty in slavery. Why didn't he begin at that point? Why did he begin by teaching us about our greatness? About when we wore the fine silks, connecting us to our brothers and sisters in the East. I think that he did so because he realized that if I can tell you and educate you about where we were and these high standards of civilization, you will naturally ask yourself, then what happened to us?
Right.
You will naturally begin to say, if we were there then how do we get to this position where we are now? I teach an African American studies course, and I pretty much do my own thing, right? For the most part, I follow the curriculum to a degree. But I start off teaching about the origin of man. That the black man and woman are the original people on the planet Earth. And it's amazing to see some of the youth sitting there and say, so what you saying, man, that black people were here first? Say exactly that's what I'm saying, right? Sometimes, as they call a hook, I have a picture of this Adam and Eve up. And I ask them to write down what you know about these people. And they say, oh, that's Adam and Eve. That's the first people on the planet Earth. But then we get into the research and begin to start talking about what Dr. Leakey found in Africa, where the oldest bones were found. And then when they begin to start realizing that the older bones were found in Africa, then that has to mean that the first people on the planet Earth were black. Which the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us in a very simplistic way. When we get to student enrollment, that's the first question that we have to learn how to recite. Who is the original man? The original man is the Asiatic black man, the maker, the owner, the cream of the planet Earth, God of the universe. The original man, the first man and woman, right? Now they still, even if you just take the principle of that, and he taught us how Caucasian people came to the planet Earth. Right. The principle in that teaching is that black people are the first people, the first human beings to ever walk on the planet Earth. Yes, sir. I heard a man say that the name of God was first mentioned ever on the continent of Africa. That we're the first that prayed to God. Right. The first that called to God. Right? So when you read in their books, they don't mention it like the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. They may say Homo sapiens. And they talk about Homo sapiens is basically a modern way, or they say Homo sapiens sapiens. That just means the human being like. Homo sapiens mean they're like human beings today. But even if you take that, and they say that the first Homo sapiens appeared on the planet Earth 400,000 years ago. And they were at the southern part of Africa, and they began to migrate around the different parts of the planet Earth. Even in that, it bears witness to what the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad says. Because as he's not a doctor, Anthony Browder, there's an interview online where he's talking about, he said 400,000 years ago that the first human beings on the planet Earth were black people. And that's what we are taught. So how can we teach black people black history and that's not a part of it? Where they don't understand or realize that if you and I were not born here first, no one else would be here.
Come on, right.
Right?
That's right.
How can we teach our children black history and they don't learn that in Africa is the home of some of the world's first and oldest universities?
Right.
And our older universities, they were not just universities, they were universities and temples.
Right.
That we didn't see a problem with learning about history and learning about science and medicine while also learning about God. We understood it was all together. That's what I wanted to show you right there. Look what he says. It is at the Smithsonian now, David Koch Hall of Human Origins. So David Koch says that in the exhibit that 100,000 years ago, Africans were the only people on the planet. Now, 100,000 years ago, it was not called Africa.
Right.
Black people were the only people on the planet. So if you process just those three pieces of information, it reinforces the fact that humanity was born in Africa. The first Homo sapiens sapiens lived in Africa and Africa alone before they appeared anywhere else on the planet. Let that sink in. Because some people don't realize that we lived on the planet Earth before white people were even a thought in someone's mind. Because some people, when they hear us talking about having a state of our own, how are we going to live without white people? No, you should be asking the question, how are they going to live without us? Right? Look at these universities. They try to say like the University of Bologna. What's that? That's not Bologna, right? You see that? Bologna? That's a European university. But our universities, the ones in ancient Egypt, they were in existence 3,000 years before that university. That's in Europe. Then there's another university. This is in Morocco. 229 years before that. Timbuktu, 12 years before that. We've always been about learning.
Come on, yes, sir.
How's it today? So when we talk about the first universities, and not only the first universities, these fellas who they talk about, these Greek philosophers, they came there to study.
That's right.
All the ones they praise, Aristotle, Thales, and Socrates. All of them came there to study at the feet of our ancestors.
Right.
Africa is one of the places that in the history of the world has some of the first women rulers that ruled over kingdoms. Right? When you go and study in ancient Egypt, you see the brilliance of the ancient Egyptians. I was sharing with some young people how the ancient Egyptians already had a pregnancy test where they knew if they took a woman's, they would take barley and put it in a sack and dip it in a woman's urine. And it was not only accurate to say whether or not she was pregnant, they could also tell the woman if she was having a boy or a girl. Now, in order for them to know that, they had to have an understanding of the functioning of the body. They had to understand something about there's an egg inside of the woman that can be fertilized and give birth. Do you know thousands of years later that they tried that same experiment and they found out that it was 75 to 85% still exact? Think about it, right? They're still trying to figure out how that they move each stone that weighed more than an elephant to build the pyramids. And initially they were saying that it was slaves who did it. But then the archaeologists began to start looking around the area and they said the people who left these things here, they were not slaves. Then they begin to start to hate the fact that we did it. They begin to start saying that it was aliens. All of this did not give you and I credit. But the Most High Elijah Muhammad in the Theology of Time lecture, in one statement, he said that his teacher taught him that we use hydraulics to transport the stones. And now some of these historians are coming out talking about how the Egyptians use a form of water to help transport the stones. Think about it, right? These are our ancestors, people who study to become a doctor. They take the Hippocratic oath. When Hippocrates was in Greece and he came to Egypt and studied papers that were written by a great genius in Africa called Amenhotep. They're talking about the Pythagoras theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. He came to Egypt to learn about that.
That's right.
They took part in mystery schools where the schools were 42 years you had to attend. And they said out of all of the Greeks, they said that Pythagoras was the one, he didn't finish the 40. He might have went up like maybe about 15 years. When Socrates returned back to Greece, teaching what he learned in Egypt, they gave him a death sentence. Because they said that he was poisoning the minds of the young people. It just means he was teaching something that was outside of their realm of understanding, right? So when we talk about this, you can't teach the history of black people and leave out knowledge of God. Because in order to teach us our true history, guess what? It also involves God. So when the Most High Elijah Muhammad says the black man is God, or every time you look in the face of a black man, you're looking at God, and the minister says that the woman is not a goddess, she's a god, that's not a statement to make us feel good. That's not a statement just to be an antidote or a medicine to counter white supremacy. That's a theological and historical fact. You know what a fact is? It can be proven. That means you can go back and study ancient civilizations before Caucasian people left Europe and study what they said about God. And you will find that many of them they portrayed or depicted their gods in the form of blackness. Some of them may have said a black bull or a black bird, but it was in the form of a black person, right? Then when you go and we look at this, look at it. Quote, the earliest messiahs, gods and goddesses on every continent, not just Africa,
Say that.
every continent, were woolly-haired black people.
Come on with it.
Let that sink in. Every continent. Because some of us think about continents and we think that it was only white folks were there. But we're the original people of he didn't say we're the original people of Africa. We're the original people of the planet Earth. Right? What's the continent that's freezing cold? Antarctica?
Yes, sir.
That means if you go there and you research, you will find evidence of us being there. Think about that. I should have brought the picture. You can go and Google it. They did a recreation of what they said was the first black person, how the earliest black people in the United Kingdom looked. And it was a brown-skinned man with blue eyes. But we were there first. Right? Then it says the original of all the gods have been of the black race. But look at what they did. They made us come back. If they knew with woolly hair, they came back and told us that woolly hair is what? Bad hair. Apologize for the heat, you all. I guess something is wrong with the air conditioner. But they called it bad hair. Look at the very things that were the physical descriptions of God. Look how they came back and made us hate it.
That's right. Hate ours.
That means they were conditioning us to reject God. They were conditioning us to reject God in the physical, but also to reject God in ourselves. So when we would see our woolly hair, this can't be from God. We will see our dark skin, this can't be of God. And as we begin to diss that and now pay for bleaching creams and hair straighteners, we were getting further and further away of looking like the ancient gods. Think about this. In the book of Genesis, Abraham was not in Europe. Abraham was in the Middle East. And he's in the Middle East where many of the people look like us. So if Abraham was in the Middle East and then Abraham saw 3 men,
Come on.
have you ever saw a man that did not have skin?
No, sir.
Would you be shocked if somebody is describing a man and they said that his skin is brown? That would be natural to you because that's just how you describe it.
Come on.
So if Abraham saw 3 men and one of them was the Lord, and he saw him in the Middle East, he had to have skin.
Come on. Teach.
And what color you think his skin was? Think it was a white man walking around in the Middle East? And that blazing sun? Think about it. Every time that they describe God, even in the Holy Quran, when they said that in the day of resurrection, the believers would see his shin. That's a part of his leg. You ever saw a leg that didn't have skin?
Come on. Teach.
Think about it. They say he's sitting on the throne and the angels carry the throne. Why would they have to carry a throne if there's a spirit sitting there? Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, was taking up and he said he felt God touch the chest with the coolness of his fingertips. You ever saw a hand that did not have skin on it? And if we were to attribute and say, more than likely, what color was that skin? If the Bible and in the history of the Quran says that Adam is made in the image and likeness of God. So in the Holy Quran, if it says that he created Adam out of black mud, and if there are hadiths where Prophet Muhammad talks about Adam being shaped in the image and likeness of God, where did Adam get to where did the color of Adam's skin come from then?
Come on.
So if Adam is in black mud, then what is the originator in?
Come on. Teach.
And this ain't shirk.
That's right.
This is what the Most High Elijah Muhammad is taught, the reality of God.
Good news.
The reality of God, right?
Teach.
The Most High Elijah Muhammad described what he said, knowledge of self. But if you're only teaching us about our African kingdoms and our African greatness, and you don't talk about our divine connection to God, that's not knowledge of self.
Come on. Teach.
And what that means is it has the ability to cause the bones to shake and rattle, but it won't make them stand up. Right? It won't make them stand up. There's no knock with people I've heard who learn about our ancient histories and all of that. I have yet to meet any of them that has a transformation story like Malcolm X.
Go ahead.
I've yet to meet any of them who said me learning about the Egyptians stopped me from smoking weed.
Teach now.
Me learning about them building the pyramids, being the fathers of mathematics, stopped me from shooting somebody. That I haven't heard those testimonies.
Go ahead with it.
But we can point to a countless number of men and women
Go ahead.
who say that this teaching that they heard,
Yeah, go ahead.
that it caused them to come from death to life. Right? Allahu Akbar. So listen, when we look at this, here we already saw that not even 1% of the schools are teaching black history. Not only CRT from K to 12. So if that is the case, why are they going to the extent to ban it? And then the research from their universities are saying what is being taught is below standard anyway. So why are they going to the degree that we have to ban it, we have to make it illegal? When they know already what we're teaching them is a watered down version. What we teach them about black history makes them want to be more a part of our civilization rather than want to leave it.
That's right. That's right.
It endears them more.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But yet, even with that, they say we have to ban it. They can't teach that, right? But the Most High Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, using the teachings of the Most High Elijah Muhammad, points out to a story in this Bible that reveals the fear of the enemy, that reveals his fear of us even in our dead state. That's something.
Come on.
Imagine being envious and jealous and afraid and concerned about a person who is a heroin addict taking your position. I mean, you see somebody that's nodding.
Yeah, go ahead. Teach.
Yeah, you scared.
Waste on themselves. And you see that person and you fear them. You fear that they can take over, they can take everything you have accomplished with all of your education, with all of your money.
Come on.
And you would have to make, if you saw somebody being afraid, you would have to say, then, damn, what type of person that is.
Right.
That even though they're strung out on heroin, you still fear them. So what do we find? In the scriptures, you find it in the book of John chapter 11 when it's talking about Lazarus, right? And the minister has called our attention to this story several times, right?
Yes.
And this is one of the reasons why it's good, brothers and sisters, to go back and read this. Because something else jumped out to me on this one. So Lazarus, according to the story, he is a one who's called a friend of Jesus.
Yes, yes,
He's loved by Jesus.
yes.
And he is the only person with all of the death and sin and chaos that Jesus saw. He's the only person Jesus cried for. When Jesus saw his condition, it says that he wept. Right?
Yes.
So Lazarus was in this. Look what it says, though. Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a what? Cave.
Hey.
And then they say it was a stone laid across the entrance. Why is Lazarus in the cave? And why is this cave described as a tomb? And what does that cave have to do with the people that we've been taught that are of a cave-like civilization?
Yeah, teach now.
Right? So then when he saw it, Jesus saw him and Jesus said, loose him. But Lazarus was dead in a cave that was a tomb, and they put a stone in front of it.
There it is. Go ahead.
After they put something over his face.
Teach.
After they bind him arms and legs, the scripture says tightly.
Still bring it up. Go ahead. Teach.
And here this dead man, first he's dead.
Yeah. Teach, brother.
And you're going to cover his face
Yeah. Teach.
where he can't see.
Teach.
And then you're going to wrap him tightly.
Go ahead.
And then you're going to put a stone in front of
Go
it.
ahead. Teach.
What was it about Lazarus that even in his dead state, they were afraid?
Come on.
But reading through this scripture again, it brought to my understanding that this scripture also shows that the work of resurrecting Lazarus is not just on Jesus.
Go ahead. Teach.
Because Jesus gave the command to those who are around him to remove the stone.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And see, one of the problems that we have with following and worshiping Jesus or following Jesus, most people think that the work is all for him. That the resurrection is for him to do.
God, come on.
But why would Jesus say, you all remove the stone? Go and remove that which is standing between me and your dead brother. Roll it from that cave that he's in. Right? And then even after, so that means when Jesus had told him to come forward, Lazarus must have stood up. We know this didn't happen symbolically. But he stood up and started coming to Jesus while he was still bounded. He came towards Jesus while his face was still covered. He came towards Jesus while his hands were still tightly bound. Jesus didn't go in the cave. He called Lazarus out of the cave. So when we're trying to resurrect our people, we can't think that, let me look like them. Let me do some of the things. It shows us that we have to be outside of the condition that they're in to call them out of that condition. All praise is due to Allah. Right? We can't be involved in the things that they are involved in.
That's right.
Even if the things that they are involved in are the things that's the popular things today. God called us to be opposite. And because opposites attract.
Right.
But when you live in a world that makes that which is opposite of you popular, if we're not strong enough, we try to blend in. instead of holding our posts and call them to this way of life. This week I just been watching a lot of like crime documentaries, the urban ones, primarily the ones in DC, the Rayful Edmonds, the Elpos and all of that. You saw the movie Paid in Full. And here this guy, Wayne Perry, when they caught him and they asked him how many murders, he laughed at. He said, man, it's way more than that. Right. They said, we got you for 50. He said, man, it's way more than that. But there's one little interview of him. And in the interview, now that he's in prison, he's talking about, man, that's why we got to stop the violence. Like what they're doing in Chicago. And what that showed me, that under all of the madness that they're in, it bears witness that God is there. But what determines what's going to grow is what feeds that. Yes. What determines if the God force is going to be manifesting God of Satan, it determines what feeds it. Yes. You know, if you ever grow a plant and if it only is exposed to moonlight, it will start leaning toward the moonlight. But if it's exposed to sunlight, it will go toward the sunlight. And most of the seed of God in us that we read about in the Garden of Eden is been nurtured by a false light. And that is what happens, right? So when Lazarus came out, look at what Jesus said. Jesus told those who are around him, loose him. I've done my work of calling him out of the grave. Now I need you all to go take the hood off of your brother's eyes. I need you to take the bind off of his or her arms. And that's a lesson to show, because when we talk about this story, it's always about what Jesus have done. And people don't realize there was a responsibility of those who loved Lazarus. They had something to do too. Right? But this is us. Even though they're teaching us a limited Negro history of black history, they still put this stone in front of us. Pass that band. We don't want them to know that, right? Now look at some of the things that this white boy said in this press conference. He said Landry's office claims that critical race theory is divisive and teaches students to view life through the eyes of victimhood. Divisive? When you all are promoting everything is taught through a Eurocentric standpoint. And then they say it's victimhood, right? This is really a deflection when they say it's victimhood, or you all just want to blame people. And that's a subtle way of stopping you from calling them out. Right. As I was watching those documentaries with all of the drugs that them brothers were showing, I said, man, look how hypocritical this is. These white boys getting before television. Yeah, we found so many kilos of cocaine. They destroyed. And I said that you all were pushing the drugs in here. Directly or indirectly. You think there was only one Freeway Ricky? We know about him because he said something. But how are these other boys getting this cocaine? Selling it at cheap prices. Being able to kill many people and still out there in the streets. How are you able to have such a large drug trafficking industry right down the street from the White House? Come on, man. So we're not victimhood. It's a cry for justice. Like, yeah, we see our condition. Like the Jewish dude was I was burning up. The Jewish dude was on Breakfast Club. And he used to be the owner of the Philadelphia Sixers. And now because he can rub elbows with Jay-Z and he helped to get Meek Mill out of jail and he can name drop all these celebrities, he's sitting up there and say, like, I just can't understand it. Like, why is there so much hatred amongst the black community? I was like, man, I was like, somebody tell him. Yeah, we got hatred, but also understand that your people have created a whole industry. A whole music and movie industry that has given us the view of ourselves. You created a whole music industry where you reward our antisocial behavior. Right? You reward that behavior among us. And here you want to talk about our condition. Fine, we do have that as an issue, but don't leave out your role.
Go ahead.
Don't leave out the damage that it has on us, that you all took the story of Noah's son Ham, and you all said that he was a Negro.
Yes.
That we were only meant to be hewers of wood and drawers of water. Don't leave out that you all created an industry that made us think that the darker skin we had, the less valuable we are. Don't leave out that you created a religious system
Yes.
that made us hate ourselves.
Yes.
Like you always want to talk about our condition, but talk about your role in it. Right?
That's right.
Then this goes further. He says the executive order is a much needed sigh of relief for parents and students across our state, especially as kids are heading back to school, teaching children that they are currently destined to be oppressed or to be an oppressor based on their race and origin is wrong and has no place in our Louisiana classrooms. He said that it's a sigh of relief for parents. What parents? What parents you talking about? And what I realize is that, see, this is a method in regards of trying to accommodate the fears of white parents. Right?
Make it plain.
I was initially going to make the title of this, The Fear of Critically Thinking Black Youth. But when I thought about it, I said it's not just black youth that they don't want to think critically. They don't even want their own. Because they don't want to have to come home and have a conversation with their children that's uncomfortable.
That's right.
Daddy, where were you when it was going on?
That's right.
Wasn't grandfather in the South? Wasn't grandfather and grandmother in Little Rock, Arkansas? Were they out there encouraging these black children to be spit on?
Yes. See.
Weren't we from Mississippi?
Right.
Were our people a part of the Klan? Daddy, how did our grandparents feel about Dr. King? Dad, that big old house that we have down there in the South, is that a former plantation? They don't want to have that discussion.
Go ahead.
So they don't want their children to think critically when they're already witnessing their children idolizing black athletes and entertainers. Their child already said, I want to be the next LeBron James.
Right.
I want to be Steph Curry.
Right.
You saw the little white girl on TikTok, on social media, when she told her mama, I want to be I'm a strong black woman. It's that white girl. Right? So they fear that. So in Florida, they put a part of the curriculum where you have to teach that black people benefited from slavery. That we learn some skills. As if we didn't have skills already. Right? And the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, in the book our research team put out, what is it about the white man, how white folks became rich. He says, how they became rich. He said that there was a period in time where if you saw a white man with a hammer, you were shocked. You were shocked, like he got a hammer. So we already had skills. And we know about that in the book of Daniel when it says that the king of Nebuchadnezzar, he came and took the wise of them.
Yes.
They already had knowledge. But you see how careful they are? Yeah, we had y'all in slavery, but y'all benefited. But if we don't know our history, we will end up believing that, right? Then it goes further. Look what it says about, remember it talks about CRT. It centers on the idea that racism is systematic in this nation and they function to maintain the dominance of white society. Basically, CRT is saying that it's ingrained in this society. And this is the thing, as I was listening to this, I was like, nobody is saying that it's a lie.
Right.
It is ingrained. And you can go and see it.
Yes, sir.
How you know it's ingrained when sociologists are saying when all things are equal, how do you explain black folks still suffering?
Yes, that's right.
When all things are equal, why is it that people of color still suffer? Where they don't benefit from the health care or from this political policy, right? And this is why, brothers and sisters, we have to begin to we have to grow in our understanding of the presence of systematic racism.
Right.
And understand this in the fabric of it. Because if not, you and I unwillingly or unknowingly begin to start blaming our people.
Yes.
They just lazy.
Yes. So
Right?
true.
We've been robbed and we've been spoiled.
Right. Teach.
But there are things that are taking place that we don't even realize. So look at some of the stats. Employment. Look according to this. According to the data, black people with college degrees are twice as likely to be unemployed as other graduates. They have studies that show that black people with degrees are less likely to get a call back when a white person without a degree
That's right.
will get a call back.
That's right.
They've done studies to show that black people with no criminal record are less likely to get a call for a job than a white person with a criminal record. How do you explain that? That's systematic racism. It says even when they have identical resumes, we got the qualifications and we still don't get the jobs.
That's right.
In one study, they were saying that if you have a black sounding name, they don't even look at you.
Oh, come on.
Bushika, Aisha, Leroy, right? Say you don't even get a call back. Then it says in education, when all groups are examined, black students are 3 times more likely to be suspended than white students, even when the infractions are similar. Meaning when 2 students, black or white, even when they commit the same infraction, black children are 3 times more likely to be suspended. That's the evidence of presence of what? Systematic racism. The criminal justice. Finally, when black people are convicted, they are about 20% more likely to be sentenced to jail time and typically see 20 sentences 20% longer than those for whites who are convicted of similar crimes. They've had news stories where a white man raped a child and they give him probation. Think about it. Because it's ingrained.
Right.
But what they don't realize, like the ministers say this. People like to talk about it's the system, and they use the analogy of the web and the spider. But the minister says, remember, somebody made the web.
Right.
And somebody made these systems.
Yes.
These systems are corrupt because the minds in which they come out of are corrupt. And guess what? The minds in which they come out of, from the very nature, they've been made to hate black.
Go ahead.
From what we're taught went on the island of Patmos. In the very process of making them was also the idea to hate black.
Yeah.
And so whatever they do, it comes out where it doesn't benefit us. They'll make a medicine for them, and we'll have more negative impacts, the more negative side effects that affect us. Because we are not the same.
That's right.
As that rapper was saying, they're not like us, and we not like them.
That's right.
Right? He goes further. Look at healthcare. Hospitals they go to talking about black people tend to be less well funded and staffed by practitioners with less experience. So the hospitals that we have, less experience. But even black doctors face discrimination. They are less likely than their similarly credentialed white peers to receive government grants and research projects. This is systematic racism. And they know that they have it. Look at the White House. The White House came out with a fact sheet trying to brag, talking about how they have put things into play to fight it. U.S. efforts to combat systematic racism. So it actually exists, right?
Yes, sir.
So when we see this ban, the very passing of this ban itself is evidence of systematic racism.
Yes, sir.
Right.
That you don't even want the people that you have deprived out of learning their history and giving them a corrupt version of it. You don't even want them to learn the truth about it. That's systematic racism.
Yes, sir.
And one of the things that this Governor Jeff Landry taught me, and I'm experiencing, why we have to pay more attention to local elections. Because a lot of times we get caught up into this presidential thing, and people have their views about that and not realize and feel like this doesn't affect us. But then that carries down, and then there are things on our actual level that do affect us on a daily basis, right? And people get in. And let me say this, brothers and sisters. The Nation of Islam, we are not anti-voting.
Right.
Right? What we do is the Mozambique Elijah Muhammad was against, we are against our people believing that voting is the end all of our solutions. You see somebody get shot, they say, see, that's why y'all need to vote. If y'all wasn't at them second lines and go voting like that, like that's the answer, right? That's what they, like it's the end all. And we don't believe in voting, but not being a Negro in voting. We are against having the ability to vote. And as the minister said, somebody being able to take it out of our hand like they take candy out of a baby's hand, right? We are against having our vote and our people's vote manipulated. And we're against blind support of political parties. Like they had a fit when Ice Cube wanted to meet with Donald Trump's people. Black folks were losing it. But the prime minister from Israel came over here and he met with Trump and he met with Biden as they're running for this election and nobody said anything. Because he understands I'm looking to see who's going to platform that's more in line with my what? Self-interest. We are against voter registration with no proper voter education. Right? And not only just voter education, but voter education based upon our self-interest.
That's right.
And if I look at a campaign and I begin to start seeing that nothing reflects my self-interest, I am of my right if I want to stay out. And if you talk to people, sometimes when people going hard about the voting thing, this election right here, you need this election right here. And I say, I'm going to vote. And then I just say, I'm going to vote for one of these independents that you don't hear about. Oh, man, that's a waste of vote. Well, wait a minute. I thought it was just about voting. No, what you're saying is my vote is not anything if I don't vote for this Democrat or this Republican. And something we have to click in our mind. Why is it that as black people, every 4 years, we are faced with this lesser of two evils? You don't think that that's like every year? It's the lesser of two evils, right? Oh, you don't think that that's a problem? And remember the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said that politics without economics is a symbol without substance. And he said the difference between us and other ethnic groups, they came over here and got financially strong. And with that financial strength, they're able to use their wealth and their influence to give power to their vote.
That's right.
They pushed us to get involved in politics and not have the money to back it. Right? So we have to understand and listen to what the Mozambique Elijah Muhammad said about voting. The black man should be very serious and careful about voting because 90% of black votes that are cast by ones who do not have a knowledge of what they're casting their vote for. Ask people when you're talking about them.
Right, come on.
Talking to them. So just give me 3 things for why you're voting for this person. And most of the time when they go on the ballot, because most people go into the ballot, they go into the voting booth, have never really done any research on these people. Well, I just remember him, they put his flyer on my car. Or he was giving out turkeys last year. And you never even understand, like, why are you voting for them? Like, what's your reason? If you are going to vote, what's your reason for it? And is it in line with your self-interest? The Mozambique Elijah Muhammad says, I still say, as I have said for many years, vote for Allah to be your ruler and come follow me. Right? But in that coming follow him, we begin to gain a knowledge of ourselves, which helps us to learn what's our self-interest. So I'm not going to vote for certain things that goes against my interests. And we're justified in this political system where they only have 2 parties. And they will make you think that other people are not even running.
Right.
You know, if you ever bring your car, especially if you have a new car and you bring your car to get serviced, and it took me a while to realize this, right? So when they present you, oh, Mr. Muhammad, here are the two options that we had. And one time I looked at it, and there's an expensive oil change and a couple of dollars less oil change. Then I moved over, and here's just a regular oil change. And here you didn't pay $150 for them to change your oil, but then you're paying them to investigate your vehicle to tell you what else you need to pay them to fix.
Right.
And you leave there, man, I got all of this other stuff. When really you just there for an oil change. But because they only presented me with two options, I only felt like I got to choose between them two until I began to start reading more. And they shepherd us into these two options. Yes. Right? And look what the minister says. He goes further. Oh, going also with the Mosque Elijah Muhammad to show that the messenger is not anti-voting. He just understood that you don't know who you are, and you going into a system where you still loving white folks, and you're going to vote for them even though they have given you nothing. Because you already been nursed in a system where you love the devil because he what? Gives you nothing. But in the message to the black man, he lifted up a politician. And I'll confess, for years I've read this book. And I read what he said about Adam Clayton Powell, and I never went to go and do research on that. If a man is saying, I can't encourage my followers to get involved in this satanic political system, but then he speaks highly of a political official, then that should be like, yo, I need to see who this man is. Because I already know this man don't really care too much about this current way that this political system is, but he's lifting this man up. And I went and watched an interview that's on YouTube of Al Sharpton. I would encourage you to go and watch it. Al Sharpton about this man right here, Adam Clayton Powell Jr. And look what the Mosque Elijah Muhammad said. The strongest politician of our kind or the person who comes nearest, as far as I know, to giving us political justice in the white courts, if he had our complete backing, is Congressman Adam Clayton Powell Jr., though he is not a Muslim. For the Most High Elijah Muhammad to know that, he had to pay attention to what this man was doing. That's right. And when you see it, the man was using his power as a congressman to get things for Harlem. They had at the time when they had the phone service. Remember, you see the movies when the operator you call, yes, connect me to. I had the dial tones. I don't know about that. Well, connect me to such and such, and they would do it. So they weren't hiring black people. That's right. So what Adam Clayton Powell told all of his constituents in Harlem, he said at 6:30, I want y'all to flood the operating system and call them so much. We're gonna do this every day. Where they're going to get so frustrated and say, we're going to continue to keep doing this until you hire some of us. And guess what they ended up doing? They had to hire. All through that, he was using his political power. He was using his force to get something for our people. Then the Most High Elijah Muhammad goes further. He said there are two other politicians. He said, I won't mention them right now. He said they're good, but they are too afraid of the white man. Then he says on another one he talks about, he says, a Muslim politician is what you need. But Congressman Powell is not afraid and would not be easily bribed, for he is not hungry. There are two other good politicians, but I will not mention them by name at this time. If they could share their fear, they could make excellent political leaders to guard our interests. We must give good black politicians the total backing of our population. You see what I'm saying? Yes. Then the minister in the Twitter books, he said, when you see your self-interest is worthwhile in voting, then vote. But in his book, The Fall of America, Elijah Muhammad said, vote for Allah and come follow him. And though I have the right to vote and I have exercised that right, my vote is not for this world. My vote is for Allah. And I am following down Elijah Muhammad to build a new reality that will give us what we are denied in our vote in this world. He's letting us know that I ain't put my whole belief in that. That's right. Even if I use the system to do certain things, but in the end, even if I do vote, my mind is still on we have to do for self. We're not getting caught in them. If God forbid, if you see how people when one of them black politicians don't win, they walk around like, oh, the world is coming to an end. When Trump got elected, I went to work. They was like, oh, what we gonna do? Oh Lord, we gonna be back in slavery. Nigga, we in slavery already. But you don't know it. And we should never be afraid in the event if he does get elected. Because one thing about us, remember what the Most High Elijah Muhammad told us what we were in our opening enrollment. He said we're the cream of the planet Earth. And you read about how we handle things in the book of Daniel when they put us in the fiery, the fiery furnace. And they thought that when we were in the fiery furnace that we were going to be burned by the fire. But the king looked in there and said that there's a man in there with them. And that man is the Son of Man, God. Right? So when you look at that, when black folks are put under the fire, that's when we rise. When Trump got into office, you begin to start seeing an increase in black HBCU enrollment. Black folks started talking about take your money out of a white bank and put it in a black bank. That's right. Black folks started pulling their children out of the schools and getting more homeschooling. So the minister says Allah has a right hand and a left hand. That if I got to use this jinn or this devil to beat you into submission, I'm going to do it. If I got to do that to make you start thinking about doing for self, then that's what's going to happen. That fiery furnace. They've thrown everything that they possibly can at us, brothers and sisters. And guess what? We still here. Yes, sir. Right? We still here. We still here. They had us on the bottom of ships. We still here. 400 years of chattel slavery. We still here. After that, Jim Crow, but guess what? We still here. After that, segregation, and we what? Still here. Then after that came the crack black exploitation. They started bringing pimps and making us idolize that. But guess what? We still here. Heroin, before the crack epidemic, they had heroin. And guess what? We still here. Then they came with the crack cocaine, the drugs, and the gangs. And we still here. Because you can't kill God. Right? You can't kill God. And all of it's painful, but guess what? It's making us stronger. And it's making them mad. Like I thought about it. Like, bro, it's clear that y'all running the world. You go downtown, y'all got all the white businesses. It's less than 10%. I don't know what's the percentage now, but it's less than 50. It's less than 20% of business in New Orleans that are black owned. And even with that, you still turn on television and still them dominating everything. When you look in the government, it's all the majority of the people in Congress and Senate are white men and white women. And even with all of that, they still say that they have to take their country back. So what are they seeing that we're not seeing? See, we still seeing ourselves in the grave. We still seeing ourselves in the tomb. Man, look at our face covered. Look at our arms bound. And you don't even realize that even in your dead state, they didn't put a stone before the grave. They still fear you. They still fear us. While we shooting and killing each other. But they still are afraid because they are afraid that if that light turns on, what's going to happen? And you're seeing glimpses of it. In these political fields, you're seeing black folks challenging them. The black sister that went viral for calling a white woman big, whatever, big back, whatever. You seeing us pushing back. You seeing black children, black folks, no, we pushing back. And they understand that we are gradually awakening and they fear it. Right? And they fear it. So this whole banning of CRT, this is another attempt to keep life blowing in the lungs of this dying white supremacy. They're like, listen, we gotta, this thing is dying. And that plan to keep us ignorant started when our ancestors put their first feet on the soil of America. And it has gone on ever since. Where they banned us, it was illegal for you and I to read for 400 years. And the Muslim Elijah Muhammad points out Henry Berry in here. He said, we have blocked the avenue of light in every avenue. And he said to reduce them to the level of the beast, right? I'm paraphrasing. But the Muslim Elijah Muhammad said they will not be successful blocking out the light of Allah. But in our supreme, as I get ready to close, I went way over, right? Y'all all right? In our supreme wisdom lessons, it teaches us about the power that one has when they're able to keep somebody ignorant. When it says, why does the devil keep our people illiterate? And some of the qualities, one who's illiterate, they become a tool and they become a slave and they're blind to themselves. But one thing about a tool can be used by someone.
That's right.
So we, in our ignorance, we are tools, but we're being used to build their world and a slave to their desires. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
So the Muslim Elijah Muhammad says what we need, what combats that being ignorant is this thing that we always talk about, knowledge of self.
Yes, sir.
Knowledge of self will help to prevent us from being blind, right?
Yes.
Knowledge of self, the Muslim Elijah Muhammad talks about how he says, the minister says that knowledge of self is akin to knowledge of God.
Yes.
And you and I are like this. We are like a farmer who found a lion one day. And he took this lion and he raised it with sheep. And this lion grew up thinking it was a sheep. You know how strange that is? You see this big old lion and it's running around like it's a sheep. This little bitty dog with all of the sheep running around. You got this big old lion running with it. And so one day they went out to graze. And when they went out to graze, this other lion who wasn't raised with sheep jumped out. And what he's trying to get something to eat, he sees the lion running with the sheep. He's like, man, you're supposed to be with me. He was so impacted by it, he didn't even run after the sheep. He ran after the lion. When he caught the other lion, he looks at him, please, please don't eat me. I'm just a helpless little sheep. And he said, man, what? He said, man, follow me. And he brought him with his river. He said, look in there. And for the first time, this lion saw his reflection. And he said, look at you and look at me.
Come on now.
And why in the hell you around here running around like you a sheep? And from that standpoint, he began to start teaching them how to roar. Teaching them about his history. You are a lion and you come from the kings. You come from the, what they say is the king of the jungle. And listen to what the story says. And the lion said, the one who used to think it was a sheep, he said this. And the little lion began to thank the big lion. And the big lion said, all I did was show you who you truly are. Even before I stepped out of that jungle, this is who you were because this is what you truly are. He gave him knowledge of what? Self. That's what he gave him. And his knowledge of self helped him to grow. And that's what the teacher of the Muslim Elijah Muhammad is. He's that big lion that came and raised a little lion. And raised other lions that begin to start teaching us, you're not sheep. You are a lion. And now we've been going around, you're hearing people say, the brother that made the movie, The Book of Clarence. You watching the interview that he did on Breakfast Club, he said, the black man is God. Where he get that from? The black man is God. They talking about the woman is the queen of the planet Earth. Where did they get that from? And you're hearing our language being used by people. That means the thought is in their head. And the enemy knows that. The enemy knows that. Now, as we close, this thing about this ban, it only confirms what the Muslim Elijah Muhammad has been telling us, that we need our own schools. And if we're not going to have our own schools, dear brothers and sisters, it's our responsibility to teach our children the history. We'll look stupid thinking that they're going to come out there learning our history. We're already in our lessons, if they know if they revealed the truth, the sword was a symbolic to say what? Off with their head. They ain't giving up their power. So we need to go and teach them. So here's some things that we can do. That's the story with the lion, y'all. Listen, If we can't have our own schools as parents, we should take opportunities to educate our children and youth that we know.
Yes, sir.
We should take the opportunity to teach them about black history that goes beyond slavery.
Yes, sir.
And don't start talking off about slavery. We'll get there.
Right.
Start talking about our ancient civilizations. But in order for us to teach that, we have to know it.
Yes, sir.
That means we have to continue to be students. The other thing, take them to black bookstores. Barnes and Nobles is not black. Take them to black bookstores. Find videos on YouTube that are factual and informative and watch them with your children.
That's right.
You can find videos about the ancient accomplishments of ancient Egypt that are from 2 hours to 5 minutes.
Right.
And watch a 5-minute video. You can get it now on your cell phones. TikTok. Showing animated videos of what black folks have accomplished, right? The other thing, find movies about historical events and watch them or watch parts of them. So when I'm dealing with young people about the Middle Passage, we talk about it in the book and read slave narratives of people who are on it. But then I take a clip from the movie Amistad, and let them see it. I find a clip from this movie on YouTube. I got a Roosevelt gave me this movie. It took me 2 years to watch because it's just so brutal. Goodbye, Uncle Tom. And let them see how our condition is. So now they're reading it, but they're also seeing it. And then when they start asking questions, now we can begin to start explaining to them. And let them know that weren't those conditions horrible? Yes, they were. Do you think people survived that? Not a lot. But what does that say? That if we can track that, the mere fact that we are here, that there's a great possibility we came from somebody that survived that.
Yes.
So what does that say about your strength?
Right. Yes, sir.
Now they're connecting it to it, right? The other, I found Regina King. She did this hero. It was like a superhero movie. This series, it was kind of, to me, it was trash. It was. I ain't gonna say trash. It was all right. But in the opening of it, they reenact the attack on the Black Wall Street. And I'll let the children watch that, right? Then the other thing, have discussions with our children about past and present events related to black people. Ask them what they know about it. Have these discussions. Here, go read this and let's come back and discuss it, right? The other thing, teach them about black leaders and organizations. We should be teaching them who Marcus Garvey was, who Booker T. Washington was, who Malcolm X was, all of these people. We should be teaching them that. Instead of trying to teach them who were the 42 presidents. I teach them about black leaders. The other thing, make sure they understand our struggle. And sometimes they may not want to read initially. When my daughter was young, we have the movie Roots. Nandi. And Nandi would watch that movie. And anybody that came over, let's watch Roots. But then in addition to watching it, we were able to explain to her. And this is what Elijah Muhammad says. And this is why it's important. So now when they have the movie, we fill it in.
Right, come on.
But the movie presents an opportunity for us to discuss. The civil rights movies. You say, damn, man, you think that made sense for them to go try to eat in them people restaurant? Had that discussion. You think it made sense for them to go and try to go walk across that what is that bridge in Alabama and get their brains beat up? You think that made sense? Right? Then the other thing, ask your children what are they learning in school. Now, what you learned in school today? Find out. Because people end up telling them some stuff. They'll be walking around. We learned about Malcolm X. He was a civil rights leader. Malcolm X wasn't no civil rights leader. It's on us.
Yes, sir.
And what I'm saying is rooted in what Master Farad Muhammad taught. Look at what he did. While he was not only worrying about educating us as adults, he then took our history and put it in short little statements called the English Lesson C1 and said, read this to your children at bedtime. You think he only wanted you to read it when they got ready to go to sleep? No, he's saying, teach them our history, but put it in ways where they can understand it. And you put it in ways where it's going to naturally make them ask you questions. So he was also concerned about even our future generations learning about what we experienced. We have to do that, right? And sometimes we may think like with our children, they come here and they may not accept or whatever, but just them being here hearing talks like this helps them because they hear something. And they hear something, right? So when they go back, if I say Abraham Lincoln ain't free slaves, that was a military strategy. So when they reading that, Abraham Lincoln freed slaves because he thought, oh no, that was a military strategy.
Yes, sir. Right.
They may not be able to fully articulate it, but just say that. And I guarantee when they say that, if that teacher don't have the best interest, they go, where you learn that from? So thank you all. May Allah continue to bless you.